Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Okay, when last we met, we showed some pretty old style of locks on knives, such as the lever lock that you see on a lot of the Spanish Navajas and the way they work. And also, even older than that, I mean, on peasant knives, the extended tang, which is used to actually hold the blade open. So, you know, when you're gripping it, it will not close on you. And I have another knife that kind of, in some ways, acts in the similar fashion to the peasant knife and its extended tang. Though a lot of people are going to look at it and go, no, not really. Well, I think it does. And that is the balisong, or the butterfly knife. You have a latch back here that holds it closed, so you know it won't actually accidentally open up on you. You move that out of the way, and then you can open the blade up. And yeah, there's lots of fancy ways to flip it and everything else. And then this latch will also hold it closed, but the latch is not necessary to hold it closed, and it is basically an extra safety feature. And sometimes the latch doesn't actually work too well to hold it closed, because sometimes when you're squeezing the handle, the latch is loose. It is not the case on this K-bar fishing knife, but it does happen on especially less expensive balisongs. But really, the balisong is in some ways like a friction folder. I mean, the way it opens is purely, you know, it's just spinning on the joint there. There's no spring tension or anything else. You can see how it moves. And if it wasn't for the top cover of it, which basically acts as an extended tang, when you think about it, the knife would not be able to stay open. But with both handle portions pulled together, the knife now is kind of locked in place. It's not going to accidentally close on you as long as you're holding both handles together. And so the handle on it basically acts as the lock mechanism for the knife. We don't think of it so much as a locking system, but it is a locking system, and it is something that is very old. It's been around for easily a couple hundred years, and a very ingenious way of both protecting the blade when closed and making sure the knife is safe to use when open. So the butterfly or the balisong knife has a very ingenious locking system as well. Now, the Marbles Knife Company out of Gladstone, Michigan, they've been around for a long time. I mean, until they basically went bankrupt and then the trademark was bought. But they had some very ingenious knives, and two of them were folding knives that have really interesting concepts to make them safe for use when the blade is deployed. And the first one is right here, is the Marbles Safety Folder. And it is a type of friction folder. And if you pull here, you see that it starts to open up. You can finally start seeing the blade. When it's closed, it's just like that. I mean, almost looks like a harmonica or something. You pull it this way, it locks right there, and then you pull it open and you get the blade all the way deployed. In theory, if you wanted to use it real quickly, you could actually cut something at this point, but really what you're supposed to do is bring the back half of the handle back down, and once that's snapped in place, the blade is locked in. You cannot move this blade as long as you're gripping the handle. You grip the handle, blade doesn't move. It's a nice, interesting way of making a fixed blade out of a folding knife. So that is the Marbles Safety Folder. Again, a friction folder with a unique style of locking the blade in place. So that's pretty cool too. And also a more commonly seen safety knife from Marbles is their Safety Hunter, I guess, or Safety Folder also. I've seen this called the Safety Folding Knife too. This one is really interesting in the way it is set up and everything. In this case, you do have a slip joint for the back spring going on, which provides good tension. You've got the half stop going on, and then when the blade is all the way forward, it locks in place. But you notice this extension going out the back. That is partly for the blade that drops down, but really the purpose of it also is to allow a very big blade to go into this knife, and then when you fold it forward, and you notice how the lanyard hole is, you could have the lanyard hole on the outside, but now you have a forward lanyard hole. But this actually, when you grip the knife, now once again, the blade is not going to close on you because you have something impeding the path of the blade, so it will not close as long as this is held down. See what I'm talking about? You have basically a forward finger toil, your other fingers go behind. You've got a lanyard loop here. You could actually have a forward lanyard loop on the knife at this point, and you've got a fairly long blade for a short-handled folding knife. So it's a way of putting a very big blade, a proper hunting size blade. This is like a 5-inch blade or so. How long is the blade actually? 4.5 inches. A very proper, good size hunting blade on a knife with a cross guard, and you know, a decent size handle as well, all in a nice little package that when you open this up and drop it down, you definitely have a big chunk of a knife, but it's safe to carry this way. And it is also something that locks the blade in place so you don't have to worry about it closing on you. So the Safety Hunter by Folding Safety Hunter, I guess, by Marbles. So another interesting locking design, and I believe this is also one, both of these I believe are well over 100 years old. So the ingenuity of finding ways to lock knives, folding knives open have been tested time and time again in the past, and some really ingenious methods have come around. Moving on to some more modern ways, maybe. I don't know if this was that modern or not. Now, this is a lock that some people kind of like. I'm not too impressed with it. It's a little latch lock, and this is on a Wenger Swiss Army knife, a genuine Swiss Army knife by Wenger. And this is for locking the main blade on the knife. And if you notice, it's a little latch up here that just kind of extends up a little bit. And then when you open the blade, it's going to move over. I don't really know where it catches, but somewhere down in there, this all catches. And if you push down on the lock, you'll see it releases the blade. See how the blade moved a little bit? And I'm thinking this actually is acting similar to the earlier lock that I showed, which was a, where is it? Come on. Oh, here it is. I'm thinking that is actually acting similar to the back spring lock that I showed earlier in part 1, where you push down on this and it releases the blade. Notice how this blade is locked. And I think that is what this is doing, is somehow the latch here, when you press down, it's breaking the back spring loose a little bit. Yeah, see how it's breaking the back spring loose, and that releases the pin on the blade. There's a little notch in the pivot point here. So that's like a little detent or something that it folds down into there, and this latch pushes all the way through the knife to break the back spring. So this is also a type of back spring lock. So a new way of doing it, instead of using a secondary blade, it is just using the latch there. The disadvantage of this is really that it is up a little bit, and it's easy to accidentally press onto that. but really it does hold it fairly well. And if you're used to using it, it's going to work all right. The problem though is as you can see, your finger, if you're right-handed, your knuckle just runs right across there, and even if you're left-handed, your finger just kind of naturally gravitates to that point. So you definitely don't want to squeeze it with that finger when you're doing something hard, because you will break it loose. But it also means that your finger is just in the right spot to break it loose if you need to. So the little latch lock on the Wenger knives, which it never came across over to the Swiss Army, the Victorinox line. Maybe it does show up on some of the Wenger Victorinox knives. I'm not exactly sure, but it was in the Wenger line that it was most commonly seen. Was not used on any Victorinox models, I should say that, unless it was a Wenger knife that was brought into the Victorinox family after the merger. And speaking of locks that began in Wenger and then moved over into Victorinox, we have this lock here, which is basically a button lock. And when you buy these larger Wenger and Victorinox knives, if you read the instructions, they actually do explain how this lock works, because it's really a hidden lock. When you open the blade locks, and you see there is a liner lock going across, and that is what's holding the blade in place. And you can, in theory, go inside with your finger and release that liner lock, but that's not the safest way to do it. Now, some people do that, and they complain that they need to put a thumb notch there so that you can release that liner lock, but it's not really what is supposed to be done. What you're supposed to do is press on the shield, and it basically acts as a button release. If you notice, when you press on the button, the liner lock moves over and you can close the blade. So it's kind of a button release for the liner lock, but it is essentially a liner lock that uses a button release. Kind of an interesting concept that they had there, and I really do like it. And the main reason I do like it is because it's smooth on both sides here. Notice it's smooth. There's no extra indentation into a handle so you can get to the liner lock. So I'd like to see this actually show up on more knives. And the fact that this works fairly well left-handed as well as right-handed is also good. You can press that button with your left hand, you can press it with your right hand, you know, left index finger, right thumb, whichever way you want to do it, you can press down on that button and break it loose and close the blade. So the little button release on the Wenger and Victorinox, I think this is a 130 millimeter knife, and that has been around for a little bit. Now, we also have the Marlin spikes that lock on a lot of Marlin spike knives. This is an old Camillus, and you see you have this little lever here that you push down on. Well, really, this isn't anything new, and we know that because where's it at? Oh, right here. Got a lever here that does basically the same thing, except you're pulling up on this one. Well, this one here, you're pulling back on. See how this lever you pull back on? Pull back on this one, and it frees the blade because of the notch in the pivot point there. Well, this also has the same thing. It has a notch in the pivot of the Marlin spike, and so when you pull up, you free that lock or that notch, and then you can close the Marlin spike again. So this is nothing new, but a lot of people are first exposed to this type of lock on these knives. And the interesting thing to me isn't so much that this is nothing new. What I found interesting is somehow Meyerchen figured out a way to do the same thing with they're two-bladed knives. You know, you've got the cutting edge on here. Remember, the sheepfoot blade on here does not lock. There's no lock on it. But what my urchin did is they worked out a way so that their latch works on the main blade, because again, you see there is a notch there, and it also works on the Marlin spike, again because of the little notch in there. So you pull on that and it breaks either one of them open or closed. Notice how the blade moves as soon as you pull this, and that's because it's been locked, not loose on this end here too, because notice the spring has been moved in both directions. So somehow they figured a way to lock both blades and unlock both blades using the lanyard loop here, which is basically the same as the lever that you have on the Spanish knives, the Spanish Navajas. So that's a pretty cool locking system too. Now next up is, well, this is a Victorinox 111 millimeter model. This is the Hunter, and it's got the older slide lock on the side here. And the slide lock will lock the main blade on the knife, and if you see as I'm bringing it around, the slide moved forward. When you pull back on it, it releases it and it will stay in the back position. So what happens is, as you're turning this blade, it's moving this slide to somehow engage into the back of the blade and lock the blade in place. Notice how it is now forward. A lot of people are concerned that this is being held in place by a too light of a spring, so it is likely to break or something. And like I said, almost any lock will fail. It just depends on how hard you press it and everything, and how hard you push on it. I've had no issues with it. I kind of like it because it's much lighter weight than throwing in another liner, which you end up with a liner lock and such. So they have discontinued it, but I do like the slide lock that was used on there. I think somehow it has a pin or something that is engaging into it. And that brings us to the next one, which is a very popular lock, especially for modern knife users and anyone who uses Benchmade. And that's what was patented. Well, it's most people now refer to it as a crossbar lock if it is generic. It is known as the trademark axis lock when it is found on a Benchmade. This is, however, is a Camillus knife with the similar type of lock, and it is a crossbar lock. And basically you pull back on this and the blade is free to move, and the blade is basically a friction folder. There's might be a detent in there. I don't even think there's a detent on this one. Yeah, a little bit of a detent on it. You can open it with the thumb studs, or you can just drop it. Come on, drop it with gravity. But it's the crossbar lock, and this is becoming much more popular now that the patent has expired, and it's free to use by many other companies. And it's basically a little spring that holds this crossbar against the back of the knife and holds the blade in place. So you see where right in there is where the crossbar is going to drop. As you turn it around, boom, goes over, holds the blade in place. It's just that simple. So the crossbar lock, well, you know, as long as the spring holds up, it's going to hold that blade in place, because you definitely have something impeding the blade from closing. And do I have another? Yeah, one more, and then I will call it a day. And that is the compression lock that you find on Spydercos. This is pair of 3, and it uses the compression lock. Let's get the blade open, and what you see is basically it is a reverse liner lock. You have the liner sliding over and engaging the blade, but it's engaging it from the back side along the spine instead of the front side where you normally see it, so that you can release it from the back of the knife and close it. So it is basically another type of liner lock, but they call it a compression lock. See there, you can see where the lock is engaging into the back of the blade. That prevents the blade from closing. Should be as strong as any other liner lock, but it is known as the compression lock. Because compression lock sounds cooler than reverse liner lock. In any case, there you go. There are a multitude of locks and locking mechanisms and different ways that people found an ingenious way to prevent a knife blade from closing on the owner's hand. Some of them are a little out there, some of them are a little more common, especially when you consider like the lock back and the liner lock. We see those all the time, but I just thought I'd share that with you. I hope you enjoyed it. It was kind of long, that's why I broke it into 2 parts. In any case, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.